Every single human being who has ever lived has asked the same question. What happens when we die? Not one person on earth knows the answer with absolute certainty. Not a scientist, not a philosopher, not a pope, not an imam. And yet, for thousands of years, humanity has built entire civilizations around their attempts to answer it. Today, we are going to look at what the world's major religions actually say happens after you take your last breath. Not what you think they say. Not the simplified version, the real answer, in all its extraordinary, terrifying, and sometimes beautiful complexity, because what you're about to hear may be very different from what you were taught. Let us begin at the beginning, with the oldest religious tradition still practiced on Earth today. Hinduism is at least 4,000 years old. Some scholars believe it is older. And its answer to the question of what happens after death is perhaps the most elaborate and detailed of any religion in human history. According to Hindu belief, the soul, called the Atman, is eternal. It has always existed. It will always exist. The physical body is simply a temporary vessel that the soul inhabits for one lifetime. When the body dies, the Atman moves on. It enters a new body, a new life, a new beginning. This cycle of death and rebirth is called samsara, the wheel of existence. And according to Hindu teaching, most souls have been going around this wheel for an almost incomprehensible number of lifetimes. But here is the crucial detail that most people misunderstand about Hindu reincarnation. You do not simply get reborn as another human being. What you are reborn as depends entirely on how you lived your previous life. This is the law of karma. Every action you take, every thought, every word, every deed creates a kind of spiritual debt or credit that follows your soul from one life to the next. Live a life of compassion, honesty, and devotion, and your next incarnation moves upward, toward a better human birth, toward greater spiritual understanding. Live a life of cruelty, selfishness, and ignorance, and your soul moves downward. You may be reborn as an animal, or something lower still. The goal of the Hindu soul is not simply to keep reincarnating forever. The goal is to eventually escape the wheel of samsara entirely. This escape is called moksha, liberation, and it is achieved when the soul finally understands its own true nature. When it realizes that the individual self and the universal consciousness, called Brahman, are not separate things. They are the same thing. When a Hindu soul achieves moksha, it does not go to heaven. It does not enter paradise. It dissolves, like a drop of water falling into the ocean, into the infinite consciousness that underlies all of existence. It becomes everything, and therefore it becomes nothing that can be individually identified. This is not death. It is the end of the illusion of separation. Now we move to a tradition that grew out of Hinduism, and then departed from it in one of the most radical ways imaginable. Buddhism was founded approximately 2,500 years ago by a man named Siddhartha Gautama, a wealthy prince from what is now Nepal who abandoned his life of luxury to seek the answer to human suffering. What he discovered, or what he claimed to discover, after years of meditation, changed the world. Buddhism shares with Hinduism the concept of reincarnation and karma, but it departs from Hinduism on one crucial point. Hinduism says you have a soul, an eternal individual self called the Atman, that travels from life to life. Buddhism says there is no self. This is one of the most radical ideas in the history of human thought. The Buddha taught that what we call the self is actually just a collection of constantly changing physical and mental processes. There is no fixed, permanent entity at the center of your experience. What we experience as I is more like a flame passing from one candle to the next. The flame continues. But is it the same flame? When a Buddhist dies, this bundle of mental and physical processes, carrying with it the karmic energy accumulated over a lifetime, influences the arising of a new being. Not the same being, not a different being, something in between. The Buddhist goal, like the Hindu goal, in truth, is to escape this cycle of rebirth entirely. But in Buddhism, the destination is called nirvana, and nirvana is not a place. It is not a state of bliss. It is the complete and permanent extinguishing of craving, aversion, and ignorance. When the flame of craving is finally blown out, there is no more rebirth. The cycle ends. What remains? The Buddha himself refused to answer this question directly. When asked what happens to an enlightened being after death, he said the question does not apply, like asking where a flame goes when it is extinguished. Now we come to the Abrahamic religions, the three great faiths that trace their origin to the prophet Abraham and together account for over half of all religious believers on earth. We begin with Judaism, the oldest of the three. And here is something that will surprise many people. Judaism, despite being the foundation of both Christianity and Islam, has historically been remarkably vague about what happens after death. The ancient Hebrew scriptures, what Christians call the Old Testament, say very little about the afterlife. The early Israelites seem to have believed in a shadowy underworld called Sheol, a place where the dead simply existed in a diminished gray state. Not punishment, not reward, just a pale echo of life. There was no clear concept of heaven or hell in early Judaism, no vivid description of paradise, no detailed account of divine judgment. Over time, as Judaism came into contact with other cultures, particularly during the Babylonian exile and the later Greek period, new ideas began to enter Jewish thought. The concept of resurrection, the dead rising bodily at the end of time, began to appear in later Jewish texts. The idea of a more active divine judgment began to develop. By the time of Jesus, Jewish thought had divided into different camps. The Pharisees believed in bodily resurrection. The Sadducees did not. In modern Judaism, beliefs about the afterlife vary widely. Orthodox Jews tend to believe in bodily resurrection at the end of days. More liberal branches of Judaism focus less on the afterlife and more on how one lives in this world. There is a concept in Jewish mystical tradition, in Kabbalah, of the soul ascending through spiritual worlds after death, of a process of purification and judgment. But if you ask 10 rabbis what happens after death, you may get 10 different answers, and all of them will tell you that the more important question is how you live, not where you go when you die. Now we come to Christianity, and the afterlife beliefs that have shaped Western civilization more profoundly than perhaps any other single idea in human history. The Christian afterlife begins with a moment of individual judgment. At the moment of death, the soul stands before God and is judged based on its faith and its deeds during life. For those who are saved through faith in Jesus Christ, according to most Christian traditions, the destination is heaven, a state of eternal communion with God, eternal joy, eternal peace. For those who are not saved, the destination is hell, a state of eternal separation from God. Subscribe my channel and like this video.